Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Generation Equality Forum's high-level event on public development banks committing to gender equality. It is really wonderful to be here today, along with our partners, Agence Française de Développement, public development banks, multilateral development banks, civil society organizations, and think tanks that together drive and encourage investments and actions towards gender equality and women's empowerment. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to the governments of France and Mexico, and to France in particular for hosting physically the Generation Equality Forum. And I want to add a very special thanks for Ambassador Delphine O for this absolutely marvelous event, which, and I need to correct myself, it's not just a physical event, it is a hybrid event, as is obvious from this panel, but it is an event that gathers tens of thousands of people across the world. Yesterday, we were at 40,000 registrants for the Generation Equality Forum, and I don't know what the numbers are today, but even if we are just at 40,000, and I say just at 40,000, it is really an indication of the hunger there is in the world for a discussion on gender equality now. On behalf of UN Women, I would also like to express my deep appreciation to Agence Française de Développement, because we have had an absolutely amazing partnership over the last 6 months. We have co-chaired together working groups composed of 32 development banks and 13 partners, and in recognition of all of the work that had been done in these working groups, we have pulled together a report that reflects the learnings from participating public development banks on their contributions towards gender equality. The goal is to celebrate accomplishments and to renew the sense of urgency that is so palpable in Paris right now, and the sense that we really need accountability, that we need to have bold targets and big ambition, and the belief that there is a possibility of transformation around public development banks' gender equality commitments, both financial but also in terms of policies. And I want to thank all of you who are joining this session and what I know will be your active participation and engagement in the discussion we're going to have today. Needless to say, this is a landmark moment when governments, corporations, philanthropy, civil society, international financial institutions have all gotten together from around the world to define and announce under the auspices of the Generation Equality Forum a set of very real commitments to gender equality. We heard yesterday from so many world leaders, from heads of state, from activists, from young women, about how everybody wants to contribute to irreversible acceleration in equality and in opportunity for women and girls worldwide. And we also discussed yesterday that none of this would be possible without bringing financing to the agenda, because it's all very well to talk about what needs to be done, but finance is a really important tool for driving implementation. And what we hope is going to be really different about the commitments that were made yesterday and that continue to pour in even as we are speaking is that 26 years after the Beijing Platform, the world has, I think, come to the realization, probably brought on by the crisis of the pandemic, that all of this talk is going to amount to nothing if we don't begin to think about the detail of implementation, of execution, of follow-through, and of really making sure that all of the words are translating into actions and that we are actually beginning to walk the talk. So by investing in policies and programs and in projects that eliminate gender-based discrimination and inequality and further gender equality by targeting financing to critical areas like decent employment for women, childcare, universal social protection, governments can generate a virtuous cycle of sustainable, inclusive growth. And I think it will come as no surprise to anyone if I say that COVID-19 has really set the world back. And we are facing a new kind of integrated crisis at the intersection of health, economics, and social policy that requires some fairly innovative thinking and does require to do business not as usual. And so how are we actually going to address this if we don't begin to look at how financing changes in the face of the lessons from the pandemic? UN Women, as should be clear from everything that's happened up to now, is very, very committed to working with a range of stakeholders to actually push this agenda so that women and girls are prioritized. And I want to say something about some of the analysis that we have done very recently, which is really important for us to think about as context, and that is UN Women, together with UNDP, has actually looked at the fiscal stimulus packages of most governments. And we have something called a global gender policy tracker, which looks at how much of a gender lens is there in most recovery packages. And the sad truth is that most governments, because they have been so busy just pumping out the money, have not really had the time to think through how do we make sure that this money is getting to women. Now, certain plans, and we heard this from the US yesterday, like the American Rescue Plan, do this well because they think about childcare, they're thinking about tax credits, they're thinking about investments needed in education. We heard from Justin Trudeau yesterday that Canada is putting a lot of money into building the largest investments in the care economy of any country in the world. So there are some governments that are thinking about this. In India, for instance, the government was able to get cash into the hands of 200 million women, but because it had digital infrastructure to leverage. So there are certain examples, but it is not across the board. This event is an opportunity to highlight the commitments and contributions of development banks to gender equality and to ask ourselves the question of what is being done and what more can be done. With that, I'm very pleased to invite my collaborator, Mr. Bertrand Valkenaer, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Agence Française de Développement, to share a little bit more about the joint efforts that our two institutions have been making to coordinate actions and to align measurement to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. Over to you, Bertrand.
Thank you very much, dear Anita, and thank you very much for the kind words that you expressed while beginning and introducing this panel. Distinguished guests, dear friends, dear Nick, dear Jeffrey, dear Etcheboru, I hope I pronounce it well, and dear Pierre. It's a pleasure to meet you online today, and it's a pleasure for the Agence Française de Développement to have had the opportunity of being one partner of UN Women in preparing, organizing, scaling, and doing this event today. So I think that what's important in our view is defining what could be feminist development institutions in the years to come. This is probably the main goal that we will all target, looking at different pathways and looking at different times to reach that objectives. But in the end, this is definitely what we want collectively to achieve, as being able to be labeled as feminist agencies in the years to come. So concretely, we see it as a two-pillar strategy that has to be put in place by institutions. One is looking at internal operations, and the other is looking at external operations. On the AFD side, and the view that we take while trying to achieve and be a feminist agency, it means that we want to reconcile our passion for field operations and the urgent need to have equality at every level of our organization, of our projects, and to the last mile, being able to bring gender equality to the last mile in all our operations. Internally, at the French Development Agency, We've set a very ambitious target 3 years ago. We wanted to reach gender equality internally by 2022. And I have the pleasure to say today that we've reached that objective in 2021 because 50% of our executive board of directors is composed of men and 50% of it is composed of women. The second important figure that I want to present you today is the results of our operation in 2020, because we've been able to increase from 30% to 67% the proportion of our operations that received a DAC1 label according to the OECD methodology. So this is the steps that we've taken over the last 3 or 5 years. We've been able to do that because we've been challenged by organizations such as UN Women, and thank you for your help. Thank you for pushing us forward. You're not the only one. Others have encouraged us strongly, firmly, but also kindly to move in that direction, and we are very proud of these progresses. So that's one aspect of the strategy that we've put in place. And the second important aspect of what we are doing now is trying to mobilize other institutions, and this is exactly, dear Anita, the work that we've been doing together since last November, when 25 public development banks joined forces to sign a public declaration that is focusing on bringing gender equality into the operations of public development institutions. 450 of them gathered last November. 25 of them have signed that declaration at that time, setting very ambitious targets and setting the goal to transform their operations, their DNA, and the results they want to achieve in the field. I have the pleasure to say today that 8 new institutions have decided to join that declaration as of today, and I want to welcome them on board, and I'm pretty sure that we'll do nice work together in the month to come and following this summit, and we'll continue to do it with UN Women, obviously. So we have 8 new partners, and we are also focusing our work. So here is the description of the 25 institutions, top of the slide, that signed the declaration last November, and you have at the bottom of the slide the 8 new partners that we are working with. Since last November, we've also focused our activity on 2 work streams, and we've gathered with several institutions that are exactly on this slide, and we worked on how to finance equality and how to mobilize finance and how to mobilize public development finance institutions to promote gender equality. Just to remind you that 450 public development institutions amount to $2 trillion US dollars of annual finance, which is 10% of what is invested annually in the world. So when we talk about recovery plans, Anita, and bringing a gender lens into those recovery plans, obviously public finance institutions are a very important means of reaching that goal and of bringing more gender lens into recovery plans. So we've worked on financing for equality, and we've also worked with UN Women and with their support on good practices and accountability, because according to where we come from and where we want to go, we definitely need to have concrete examples of how we can transform operations, what we can do in the field, and what we can do to bring more equality in energy, education, transportation, any kind of sectors where development is at stake. So I would like to make a few commitments, because today is an important day, as it was reminded by Anita. We commit that we will support the following initiatives. We will support the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, and thank you, UN Women, for encouraging us to join that initiative. We also want to follow the initiative of the harmonization of criteria between the OECD DAC and the 2X challenge. It's a very important step forward to make sure that we speak the same language, we count the same language, and we are accountable in the end in the same way. We also want to commit to follow the EBRD's initiative on gender and climate that will be presented right after my introduction. And we also want to support the IDSC gender roadmap, which will be presented today also by TSKB. And finally, a small word to conclude on what Proparco is doing. It's our subsidiary that deals with the private sector, and they are promoting the creation of a 2x collaborative network, because networking, collaboration is at the heart of any success that we want to achieve today. And finally, as a public institutions dedicated to the financing of the private sector, they also want to converge and to merge their own 2x challenge criteria with the OECD DAC measurement system. So thank you very much for what you will say now, and thank you, Anita, for introducing again this panel.
Thank you very much, Bertrand, and I really want to congratulate you for all the things that AFD is committing to do. And I really also want to say I really like the fact that you said feminist development banks. There was a time when feminism was a bad word and people didn't want to say it. And I am so happy to hear you say that, because it is about time that we accept the mantle that we can all be feminists, all the men included, and that there is something very good and very important about doing that last mile of financing for gender equality. So all of the measures that you have mentioned that are specific to AFD are fantastic, and well done for that. But also really huge thanks to all of the partners who have joined in this journey and are part of this journey. The old partners, fantastic. New partners, welcome. Really good to see that. And with that, I would now like to invite Nick O'Donoghue, the CEO of CDC, which you all know is the UK's development finance institution, to share his thoughts, reflections, and commitments with us. Over to you, Nick.
Me to be at the Gender Equality Forum. And I'm here today, obviously, firstly to represent CDC, the UK's development finance institution, and a founder member of the 2X Challenge. But also I'm speaking importantly on behalf of all our many partners from other development institutions that have participated in the 2X initiative since its formation just over 3 years ago. Now, as Anita said in her introduction, and I think everybody knows, the finance industry has a critically important role to play if we're going to achieve the goal, the global goal of gender equality. And the 2X community of investors is committed to the practice of gender lens investing in order to try and fill those gaps, those investment gaps and market failures that currently pose so many problems to women's economic participation around the world. And it's amazing today to think that globally, businesses run by women receive less than half the funding of businesses run by men. And in 2021, that should make all of us feel extremely uncomfortable. And it's even more shocking when you think that that remains the case, even though there's increasing evidence and research that gender-balanced businesses perform better on almost every metric. So in order to try to address the gender investment gap today, I'm very pleased to announce the launch of a new industry body to focus on gender lens investing, the 2X Collaborative. And the 2X Collaborative will bring together a broad and growing range of different investors who are deploying capital with a gender lens. And its mission is really to convene and equip investors with the resources and the tools they need to increase the volume and impact of capital directed at women's economic empowerment. And we hope that the collaborative will provide members with access to peer lending networks, that it'll provide access to data and research, to co-investment platforms, to partnership and training opportunities, to innovative investment tools. And the collaborative will give members the opportunity to join structured networks, so networks, peer group networks for pension funds or banks, for example, sector networks in energy or agriculture, theme-based networks on climate or the care economy. And of course, the 2X Collaborative will also continue to strive, as its members have already done, for harmonized industry standards for gender lens investing and for credible and consistent market data that's readily available to help promote investment flows towards gender smart businesses worldwide. So we're very pleased to partner with the Gender Smart Investing Summit team, with the Investor Leadership Network, with all our friends and colleagues from other development finance institutions, and indeed with major financial institutions like Citibank as core supporters of the 2X Collaborative. And we hope that it will provide a one-stop shop for gender finance and a platform to allow us to mobilize an accelerated flow of capital into gender lens investment products. So to conclude, I'd like to share a short video that we've prepared to give more context and information about the new collaborative.
Investing in them creates a strong ripple effect at every level, from communities to companies to the wider economy. Yet women are often excluded from the private sector and access to finance. We set out to address this with the 2X Challenge, which was originally set up by development finance institutions and multilateral development banks, including DFC, to build a shared understanding among investors of how to invest with a gender lens. We are very proud to say that since 2018, we have collectively invested $7 billion in private sector projects empowering women in developing countries. And we announced at this year's G7 our new commitment to invest $15 billion over the next 2 years. Building on the momentum generated by the 2X Challenge, a growing group of private and institutional investors want to come on board. That's why we're announcing the creation of the 2X Collaborative, a new formal industry body to build the practice of gender lens investing across a wider network of investors. The network will provide investors with the tools and resources that they need to invest in women. As a part of this new network, 2X is partnering with Gender Smart, an initiative which builds the capacity of investors to unlock gender smart capital at scale.
The field of gender finance has come a long way in the last decade, and increasingly it's being seen as just smart investing, which it should be. We're so pleased to be a core partner to the 2X Collaborative to help drive more progress in the coming years, in order to, at every step, shape a sustainable and equitable future that meets the needs of communities as well as capital allocators.
And to increase the reach of the 2X Collaborative, we will also partner with the Investor Leadership Network, a consortium of 14 global pension funds and asset managers who together represent more than $5 trillion in assets under management.
We at the ILN are committed to promoting gender and racial equity, both internally through culture and employment and externally through inclusive investing practices. We have been a supporter of 2X since we both launched at the 2018 G7, and we are now pleased to continue sharing our knowledge and expertise with the new 2X Collaborative to align around and further our shared goals.
Investing with a gender lens can unlock huge barriers in women's access to finance, jobs, and goods and services. But to achieve greater change, we need coordinated action by investors of all kinds. We invite you to join us.
Thank you so much, Nick. What a great initiative, and really great to see it going from strength to strength. Congratulations on the partnership with the Investor Leadership Network, and as well, and of course, the partnership with Suzanne and Gender Smart Investing. I think this is really going to enable this initiative, which started at the G7, to take on a shape and form that is commensurate with the size of the problem. Because as you said, Nick, it is pretty shocking that in 2021, women-owned businesses still receive only half the capital that male-owned businesses do. So we've got to change that, and fast. And to hear about how we need to harmonize to do better and to really leverage the power of the common and the power of plenty and the power of collective commitment, I'd like to now invite Jeffrey Schlaffenhauf, the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, to present yet another harmonization effort which will allow the community to track gender equality investments and to compare performance with peers and other stakeholders in the gender finance industry. Jeffrey, over to you.
Monsieur Rieu, Mesdames et Messieurs les panélistes,
Ladies and gentlemen,
Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis ravi d'être parmi
I'm
vous
delighted
aujourd'hui
to be with you
afin
today
d'échanger sur
in
ce
order to
sujet
exchange
essentiel
on this
qui est le
essential topic,
financement pour
i.e.
l'égalité
the
entre les genres.
gender equality financing.
L'égalité entre les genres et
Gender
le
equality
renforcement de l'autonomisation des femmes et
is going
filles
to
est une
allow
question de
empowerment
droits
of girls
humains.
and women and be the
C'est également
match
une
the
question
protection of human rights,
d'efficacité
and it's also
et
a
durabilité de
sign of
développement.
efficiency for
De
development.
plus, l'égalité entre les genres est
Moreover,
difficile pour sortir
gender
de la
equality
crise du COVID-19.
is particularly important given the pandemics.
Nous devons aider
We
à
know
proposer aux
that we
femmes
must
et aux filles des
offer
possibilités et
girls
des
and
choix.
women possibilities,
De
opportunities
plus,
and
il est
choices.
nécessaire de
Furthermore,
changer
it
les
is
esprits
essential
afin
to
de faire
operate a
évoluer
change of
des
mind
normes sociales et
before
aussi.
changing social norms or standards.
Jeffrey, we lost you for a minute. Can others hear Jeffrey? Now we hear you. Great. Please, go ahead. Okay.
To change and evaluate social norms in a new and different way. We need to make sure we have the resources in order to augment these investments on behalf of gender equality. The OECD is a place for norms and that advise the actions of governments, private societies, and foundations, philanthropic, and also do the analysis of what's accomplished and decompose data based upon gender in order to create international comparabilities. It's a place to exchange values and arrive at different places that we can create the data, etc. Obviously, at the OECD, we have the DAC, or the Development Assistance Committee, that actually reports on aid by gender and try to utilize our marker for the gender equality of men and women. And it's a system to let countries know from the DAC what the creates a reference base and comparable base for the statistics on aid for development. We're glad to have 40 foundations and 40 banks and organizations, multilateral organization, that use this marker of égalité homme-femme for aid. And so here I have it written to continue in English. So just what the data from the DAC Gender Equality Policy Marker tell us. Today, 45.5% of bilateral aid either integrates, that means mainstreams, gender equality, or is dedicated to gender equality. This share of aid with gender equality objective is higher than ever before and corresponds to 53 billion US dollars in aid. For private philanthropy, 25% of financial flows go to gender equality, either integrated into other sector programs or standalone or dedicated support. The same figure for multilateral organizations and banks is 31%. While we see an upwards trend in the focus on gender equality objectives overall, I think we can agree that we can still all do better. Development actors should make efforts to integrate considerations for gender equality in all development finance, including climate finance. In this context, we are delighted and warmly welcome the fact that the DFIs who are members of the 2X Challenge are aligning their gender lens investing criteria to the OECD DAC Gender Equality Policy Marker Tracker. The 2X criteria has become a recognized standard for gender lens investing. This alignment is a big step towards providing a more holistic picture of all types of development finance with the intention of advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. The alignment of the 2X criteria to the OECD DAC gender marker will allow for increased comparability and for strengthened transparency and accountability across all actors. At the OECD, it is part of our core mandate to continue tracking these data and providing analysis and policy guidance on financing for gender equality. We will be pleased to contribute to this work to future accountability framework set up after the Generation Equality Forum and in the context of the different action coalitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. And you do really important work at the OECD in creating standards that everyone can follow. So thank you so much for all of the efforts to align the work across different institutions and different parts of the industry so that we are comparing or able to compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges as is often the case now. With that, I'd now like to turn to Ms. Ece Boru, the president of TSKB, the Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, and to start by first saying a really big thank you for being a long-standing partner with us on the Women's Empowerment Principles, and then to hear from you on your commitments for generational equality. Over to you, Ece.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. International initiatives on gender equality are of great importance for mobilizing capital to empower women and fostering gender mainstreaming. To leverage sustainable and inclusive development in all countries, as development banks, we have an important role to play. In this context, as IDFC, we established 3 years ago IDFC Gender Equality Working Group to address and support the Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. We engaged over the past years in several initiatives, platforms, and events, and conducted various works within the club with a full effort to raise awareness around gender equality. During the first Finance in Common Summit took place last year, IDFC Gender Equality Working Group led the high-level gathering on gender equality and launched the joint statement on gender equality and women's empowerment. By this statement, the signatories commit to work collectively towards this focus. Considering the concrete works in this area that IDFC conducted, Gender Equality Working Group carried out first benchmark study in 2018 to assess the members' existing internal gender practices. This study showed that although there is a significant progress towards gender equality and women's empowerment in recent years, some persistent gaps and disparities still remain between women and men. That being said, it should be noted that while we are in the decade of action, the SDG 5 is unfortunately lagging behind the other SDGs, and women have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to deepen our individual practices within the club and support our level of alignment with the SDG 5, an extensive study, namely IDFC study on gender equality, was launched in 2020 with the support of an external consultancy firm. The main objective of this study is to consolidate the key role that they play in financing an inclusive and sustainable development which promotes gender equality practices into their external activities. As a result of this comprehensive assessment, bank level and IDFC level recommendations and action plans will be developed. Having said that, today I would like to draw your attention particularly to IDFC collective action plan that will be fed by the bank level action plans of each participating bank. This plan will consider learnings from both bank level and IDC level diagnostics, current trends, and best practices. This action plan will be guided by various principles such as integrating SDG 5 and expanding gender mainstreaming in operations, developing the capacity of members, and creating knowledge and supporting collaboration among members. Building on this principle, as IDFC, we are willing to develop our action plan based on 5 different priority areas in short, medium, and long-term perspective during the upcoming years. These priority areas are first one, empowering women and girls through access to economic opportunities. The second, strengthening gender mainstreaming into members' operations. The third, fighting against all forms of violence against women and girls. 4, making IDFC an active platform on promoting and advocating gender equality and women's empowerment. And the last one and the fifth one, supporting internal mainstreaming at club member banks. I believe that this study is a concrete illustration of the IDFC's collective commitment to gender equality and reflects the spirit of the club, who celebrates its 10th year this year. It's an honor to be here with you today to discuss our roadmap by this study. We will continue to work all together with our respected stakeholders in collaboration. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for laying out this really important and ambitious roadmap, and for leading the way and for showing others through very practical steps how it could be done. You know, a lot of the discussions of the last day or so have focused so much on the what, but really the challenge for us now is to move from the what to the how, and to have very specific tools to do that. And I think what you described is a set of tools that others can also look to and seek to emulate. With that, I'd now like to invite Pierre Heilbronn, the Vice President for Policy and Partnerships at EBRD. And before Pierre speaks, I just want to say, Pierre, we at UN Women are so very grateful for the partnership with EBRD. Your CEO, your president, has been an absolutely amazing partner for us, and we are really looking forward to working with you to deepen the partnership around the MOU that Odile and I signed just a few months ago. So with that, over to you, Pierre. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Anita, and thank you, obviously, to Bertrand also convening us around this very important agenda and based on trust, but an excellent collaboration, as you mentioned, Anita, which will only deepen probably in the next years. Obviously, I'm personally also very proud equality at the heart of the recovery programs. It is a very important year also for EBRD because we will adopt our new gender strategy for the next 5 years. And all of that will lead to an ambition of fully mainstreaming all our operation across the gender objectives. One word, because Bertrand mentioned that, and I think we have today something to announce around the link between gender and climate action. And we've been very much involved with IFD and other partners around this agenda. Being honored and proud to be one of the action coalition leaders of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice. Why this is very important? Because we know that women are very much hit in different way than men by the climate change phenomenon. And climate change challenges, in fact, gender equality in a very direct way. I will not go into many details, but we know that women are most likely to work in the most affected sectors by climate change: agriculture, tourism, hospitality. We know also that generally they lack resources to support their businesses against shocks, and they have issues of access to finance. At the same time, women are key actors in making the changes needed to mitigate and to tackle climate change as customers, as consumers, but also having global stewardship of resources. All of that explains why we should fast-track this gender and climate action nexus, and with partners I mentioned, obviously UNITA and UN Women, but also IFD and other partners, we really think that this fast-track initiative is fundamental to benefit from a strategic umbrella, both better coordinating our joint engagement, measuring better the result and the impact of our action, but also prioritizing gender mainstreaming into all our operations. And we know that no single institution can achieve this work alone. Last word about partnership, because I think this is fundamental to win the battle in a way, is building on what Nick's mentioned about the 2X challenge, climate and gender task force, because there also we are very much working both with CDC and the EIB in looking at how we can advise investors on the nexus between gender and climate action. We are in the process of building sectoral toolkits. We will launch tomorrow one which is very much focused on agriculture, food and forestry, and we very much also look at providing this guidance in all these sectors in the next weeks and months of the year. So really, in a nutshell, we are in front of an unprecedented opportunity to bring together inclusion in green and to make women full participant for climate action. And we really believe that together we can achieve much more than any institution can do on its own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre, and you underscore the importance of partnerships for driving this agenda and for really ensuring the full participation of women for climate action to build back both green and in a more gender inclusive way. With that, I'd, on behalf of UN Women, just once more like to thank all participants for their contributions, commitments, and real passion for this agenda, which we see and we really appreciate being translated into very specific commitments. For the remainder of the discussion, where we'd like to hear from the audience and field questions, I am now going to turn the mic over to my partner, Bertrand, and to say my goodbyes to all of you and just say thank you once again for joining us. I apologize that I have to jump off, but it is just back-to-back for UN Women in these next few days. So with that, thank you again very much to everybody, and over to you, Bertrand. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much, Anita, and thank you for the time that you spent with us. Dear colleagues, we have 15 minutes together now, and I would like to ask you one or two questions, and if you don't mind, I will give you the floor to answer them. So we've seen the steps that are being taken by several financial institutions, very ambitious steps, very innovative as well as the initiative which is taken forward by the EBRD, making the connection between one of the two biggest challenges that the world is facing today, bringing equality between men and women and fighting climate change. So that will obviously raise many questions and will raise attention on how do we move from the what to the how, as was mentioned by Anita. So if I turn back to you now, my two questions are very simple. What does it mean, or what would be your recommendation for public finance and private finance institutions in terms of what they should do to bring equality in the field? First question. And second question, if you want also to focus on this issue, is what would be the success of your own agency 1 year, 2 years, 5 years from now in terms of gender equality? So Nick, if you are ready, if you want to start by you on those two issues. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Bertrand. Delighted to answer that question. Look, I think when we talk about what development banks and financial institutions can do, I think I'd focus on three things. I think first of all, you need to adjust. You need to make sure, everybody needs to make sure that they're adjusting their own investment process and they're making it fit for purpose in a world of gender lens investing. And of course, and that means making gender a key question on all your investment, in all your investment decision making. And that's not just about 2x eligibility. Obviously, we want to maximize as much as possible those investments but that are 2x eligible. But we recognize not every investment will be 2x eligible, but every investment you make will affect women. And so you need to factor that in to your investment decision-making process in a very specific way. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is around, and we've talked about this, other speakers have talked about this, is around collaboration. And that's working together on specific transactions, providing catalytic capital to make sure, which certainly development finance institutions can do, to make sure things actually happen. And then working together to harmonize standards and improve data. And that implies some compromises from all of us, but it's very important that we have that we reach that we harmonize around standards and produce good data. And then the third comment, and I would make, this is really just directed at financial institutions, that sort of the non-DFIs. Look, I worked for nearly 30 years in mainstream financial institutions, and I know that those institutions really only move when they feel like they're missing something. And so my message to all those financial institutions listening to this today is, you are missing something, that this train is leaving the station in the same way that we saw this explosion in ESG investing, that we saw an explosion in impact investing. This is a movement that has enormous momentum, and you need to be on board because your clients and your stakeholders are going to demand that you are. So that's my sort of call for action for all the mainstream institutions listening today. And I think in terms of our own agency, in terms of CDC, we obviously need to do all of those things. We need to integrate it into our investment process. We need to collaborate with our partners and peers, and then we need to make sure that we actually put money to work behind gender lens investing. So I'll stop there, Bertrand.
Very much, Nick, and I appreciate the way you talk about this, because when dealing with financial issues, we need to use the vocabulary of financial institutions to make sure that they will understand what is at stake there. And your comment on the fact that they are missing something or that they may miss something and that there's a train to catch is very useful in that respect. Jeffrey, if you want to jump in.
Here?
Perfectly.
Let me just say, I think that the previous comment about collaboration, joint efforts is really on point here. And I think one thing we at the OECD always like to remind ourselves of is we don't bring money to the table like the development banks do or private financial institutions. What we do offer is a place for peer learning and platforms to help accomplish goals, try and strive towards standards or a common understanding of how we do things. And obviously, we at the DAC, we host the Network of Gender Equality, or GenderNet is an example, where we can get various stakeholders in the development process to come together and try and reach a common understanding of where we need to go to actually advance this call. I know that development banks have been an integral part of the peer learning discussions that go on in gender equality and development within GenderNet for a number of years. And I think the one thing that's really pleasing here is that we're seeing increasing participation from DFIs in this particular set of discussions. And I think so our place in this is to, through the 2X Collaborative, partnering our DAC GenderNet partnering with them to facilitate this peer exchange across actors on financing for gender equity is an important step forward. If we want to drive progress on gender equality, action is needed throughout the system. There's not going to be any one silver bullet, but I think our commitment and willingness to work together on this is particularly important. And I'll close by saying, you know, today's event is about funding and accountability for that funding. While this is a foundation for accelerating action on gender equality, we need to have a clear understanding of financing landscape in order to do this. So other pillars important are better evidence-based policies and strategies, concrete tools for even better practices at the field level in low and middle income countries in particular, along with expertise in the human resources, and finally, gaining that high level support within the institutions and the financial institutions as well to push for change from the top. Getting the buy-in and involvement from people at the top is extremely important. And I do know for us here at the OECD, both within the DAC, our DAC chair, Susanna Moorhead, is extraordinarily committed to this, as is our new Secretary General, Matthias Cormann. We really want to work together to advance in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. And I have to say that although you're not bringing any money to the table, I think that your organization and the work you do in setting the standards for gender equality is much more powerful than the money that Nick, Eche, Pierre, and I are bringing to the table. Because the standards you are setting will, in the end, be what stakeholders, as was mentioned by Nick, institutional investors need. They will be looking for that information, and that information, when made available to Chinese people, Latin American people, African people, Northern European countries, that information, because it has the same meaning elsewhere worldwide, has a huge impact on the decisions taken by investors. Pierre, if you want to jump in and say a few words about your recommendations for public finance institutions and or your successes in the years to come as gender equality is concerned.
Yeah, sure, Bertrand, and I will build more or less on what has just been said by Nick and Jeffrey. EBRD is a strange animal because it's about investment and policy. So in a way, it's about project money, and there I think everything which Nick said is very important, and I think we'll look through gender lenses. All our project, I think, will develop on our own for our institution a target which in the course of the next weeks, which will be announced probably in the autumn, a little bit comparable to the target we have on green project. As you know, we have a target of 50% of our investments in devoted to climate change, mitigation and adaptation. We'll have the same on gender, but I would say that beyond general standards, and OECD has a crucial role there, there is a role in policy, which means bringing along national authorities in the countries where we operate to adopt also rules which are conducive to give all the opportunities to women in economic terms. And that we've been doing that in 30 countries. We want to develop that because we think that it's really fundamental to make a real change beyond any money we can put in these countries. I'm not sure that the main issue is only the amount of money we put in the countries. In terms of our own vision about the role of our institution, I mentioned about our own targets, objectives we'll set in the next weeks. I think one objective I think we should have in common is to have the capacity to spell out objectives in a collective way, which means reducing transaction costs in the, for our clients at the end of the day, because we bring same standard as much as harmonized products and procedures. And I think all the platforms we mentioned, and which will only grow in importance, are crucial in the how we can deploy this ambitious agenda.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Definitely, transaction costs, in a way, in a certain way, are exactly at the heart of what we can do in terms of harmonization and standards. And we talk about transaction costs for operations, but also for stakeholders, shareholders, investors, and consumers. So in the end, it's a virtuous circle and it benefits to everybody. Eche, it will be, it's up to you now to, in a way, conclude this very interesting and challenging discussion. So what would be your recommendation for public finance institutions, or what would be your personal success for you or for TSKB in terms of bringing equality in the field? Thank you.
Thank you. As a development bank, we recognize our substantive role in the achievement of SDGs and in contributing to progress on SDG 5, which represents a promising point for change by its ambitious and comprehensive targets. Acting on this agenda requires a strong intercoherence with other SDGs and increased collaboration to end all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. It also aims to ensure that all the barriers to their empowerment is removed. It is a certain understanding that without gender equality and women's empowerment, SDG will not be achieved. However, the first analysis on SDGs achievements reflect that SDG 5 is unfortunately lagging behind others, and a lot of remains to be done for reaching out this goal. It's also a fact that women and girls have been disproportionately impacted by the economic and social consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic and also climate change in the near future. That being said, the gender equality and women's empowerment involve increased efforts and innovative tools that can be supported by financing and expertise. It is of great importance that as development banks, we collectively strengthen our commitment to gender equality for the mainstreaming itself and empowerment through the financial system. In this regard, the initiatives that my colleagues mentioned during the panel are truly inspirational and motivational examples. As TSKB, we are very pleased to be part of the Green and Gender Fast Track initiative presented by EBRD, which will complement and leverage the efforts of other initiatives to address the challenges and opportunities climate change creates for gender equality. In addition, we believe that TSKB's Equal Steps platform, which has been introduced as one of the projects in the PDBs in Action Digital platform during the last year's Finance in Common Summit, is a good example to illustrate the bank's role in emphasizing the importance of equality between women and men in the business life and encouraging the private sector towards equal employment. I truly believe that development banks will continue to contribute to a more sustainable, inclusive, and greener development and drive progress on gender equality through their products and services. Especially during these hard times impacted by COVID-19, it is utmost importance to increase funding towards gender equality through a gender lens investing approach to change the outcomes. It is also valuable to improve dialogue and collaboration with other stakeholders who commit themselves to gender equality and to accelerate progress by various channels such as capacity building and peer learning. STS Kibi, we will continue expanding our impact for a sustainable development while accelerating our build-up capacity for gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Etche. Thanks a lot for that ambitious agenda, for raising the level of standards so high. So I think it's a very ambitious goal and a very ambitious vision that you are carrying with you as the head of TSKB, and we will be very pleased continuing working with you in the coming month. So I think we are coming to the end of our panel. As Nick mentioned, and thank you for your words, Nick, I think the main message to get back from that panel is that you may be missing something, or you will miss something if you don't embark gender equality in your operations. And the second message that I will retain from that panel is that we've set the objectives, we've set the what. Now, the coming weeks and months, and I say proposal I'm also making to my colleagues, I propose that we reunite and that we gather to discuss the how and how we bring in the field, how our operations will be more efficient in terms of bringing equality. So Pierre, Nick, Etche, Jeffrey, thank you very much for your time. Anita left us, but once again, thank you very much for UN Women for organizing this and for bringing us forward so that we can set the objectives, take stock of what's been achieved over the last years and months, and see where we will be going in the next month as well. Thank you very much to you all, and I wish you a very good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.